Hello, I'm Craig Constantine.
Hi, y'all. I'm Brigitte Cutshall.
Hi, Bridget. It's a pleasure to get a chance to sit down and talk. A pleasure to meet you. We haven't spoken before. I do a little discussion before this just so people can get a feel for how Craig does things. And I wanted to just say we started talking about, I say podcasting, and then people respond. And you launched right into talking about stories and storytelling. And it sounds like you have a little twist on that about learning through storytelling. And I'm wondering, when you talk about storytelling, what is it that you think it can do that's special?
What I try to do is learn from other people's experiences. Everybody thinks they have problems that no one else has experienced, which is not true, right?
Right.
And we all have dealt with something similar, and I think that's why I like um, to listen to podcasts or listen to like radio stations and to the more of the stories. I just like to learn from that. And the other, I've written a couple of books, and some of them are sharing stories of my experiences or people that have connected with me. And I just like the openness of it, right? I mean, you can make it like a lot of fiction books, by the way, it really are based on, some of it is based on experiences, but they're not, but they're trying to hide the
Hmm.
actual real people if you think about it. And that's kind of how I've always been that person. I should say, I almost said kid, who was really into stories and making stuff up, right? In a situation. I don't know why I was that way, but I think because maybe it was the generation I grew up in, we had more free time.
Yes. Amen.
But
I'm
right,
in
so we had to be creative,
pre-internet.
right? You
Right.
understand? So at least I was trying to do it in a good way and not bad. Um, right? Right, and
If I
that's kind
asked
of
your
what it is.
parents, would they agree or would they disagree?
Right, my
Well,
parents were like, I had an older brother, right? So I mean, he's still around, but I was always trying to get his attention.
hmm.
So I would write stories, and he was into sports, so I would write a story about some football game, which I didn't give a crap about football. But I would write like a story for him
Hmm.
about how the game went, and I would tape it to his door. So that's just something I've always been interested in. And then I like to listen to other people
Have you thought
sharing
about
stories.
this is, I'm a, people would say I'm a pretty good storyteller, but it's not something that I've tried to deploy intentionally. Like I haven't tried to write a book. I
Right.
haven't tried to I'm not creating a podcast where I'm telling stories specifically, but I'm wondering if you've thought about the differences between storytelling in written format versus storytelling like when you're podcasting. And I'm just wondering, like, people talk about voice, right? Like we have a voice that we speak with, and then you have the variation of Craig that tells stories, gets crazy and emphatic and waves. I'm waving my hands around a lot. Um, and then when I tried to write, I went, that voice
It's
is not the
different.
same.
It's
So
definitely different.
have you struggled with changing from written to podcasting or back
Well,
and forth or thoughts on that?
I've been told my writing style is conversational. That's just kind of that's the way I write. And but I am my poor sons, they said I was a grammar Nazi growing up because because I've always just been so into how you were taught how,
Yeah.
grammar is. And so I try not to get so focused into that. And I think that's why people like podcasting too, because it flows. Most of the time it's a conversation that with the background is around a
Right.
story,
Right.
right? So it for me, I was surprised, really surprised when I was afraid to do this, to talk on a podcast or I don't know why, but people said they liked my voice. But I needed that encouragement, right? And that's probably why
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I don't, you feel you're not confident in certain areas and you're more confident in others. Whereas a lot of people, they feel they can hide behind the words in a book, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I
Be
know,
out of sight.
right? I know a woman who is a great public speaker. She makes a lot of money, but she's terrified to write a book
Huh.
because it's permanent, right? Where I'm the opposite.
Oh.
I was terrified to like record my voice, and be in
Hmm.
front of people. I shouldn't say terrified, but it just depends on your upbringing and your personality and what your um what you like to do. And so
Yeah,
I've
what you got
learned,
comfortable with, right?
right, what you're comfortable with. And I thought that was, I'm like, I told her, you need to write a book. And she's like,
Hmm.
she's terrified because it's permanent. That's her opinion. And I said, well, to me, video recording is just as permanent, and your audio is just as permanent. And, but people feel like they're like the podcasting, or that's why I don't know, I should say radio stations, but they have a connection with you because it's like you're there with them.
Yeah,
And
the audio medium.
audio, yeah, it just depends on your preference. And that's why I'm kind of playing around with a little bit. I'd rather do, um, try out both. So that makes sense. And that's
Hmm.
kind of why some of my audio recordings, in the past, I've written some in advance, but then you can't read it the way you wrote it.
Yes, it's tough. Some people apparently can. Some people apparently can write for. Come on, Craig. Words into sentences. Put. Some people apparently can do screenwriting. Jeez, my
Yes.
dictionary lookup is slow. But people who write for the screen or who write for TV, they obviously have to be able to do it. So it's clearly a thing that can be done, but it's a very different muscle.
I learned that last year, by the way, in 2020. Um, Everybody was like, "What the heck do we do?" A lot of things were shut down, and my business that I have, I it is involves books, right? But that slowed down because my clients didn't know what they were going to do, and it affected the supply chain. So I signed up for a online screenwriting class
Hmm.
in Atlanta, and uh, I was gonna. Well, my second book, it was recommended I write or have a film made out of that second book. And I'm like, I don't know squat about screenwriting.
I wouldn't know good screenwriting if it fell in my lap.
Right. And so I signed up for this class online, and I met them online, and one of them recommended, she has her brother's in the film industry, and Atlanta's growing for that. And she recommended we do a short film together to write it
Hmm.
together. And then what we did, we ended up shooting it with our iPhones,
Sure.
because we weren't allowed. It was then we were locked down here in Atlanta. Then eventually, when they opened up the parks, we shot one of the films. We made the at the park. That's how we met in person for the first time. But anyway, one of the ladies is an editor, video editor, excuse me, at Cox Media. So I helped write the script and outline, and the other ladies helped with what they were good at. Anyway, we submitted it to the um, Screenwriting Guild, through Atlanta, and we were selected. We were absolutely shocked. We didn't know, but what it was, they was so honest about three women. We made fictional characters, but I learned. But I think it helped that I have a conversational writing style. So, but still, you got to set up the stage, and it helped. I should say stage, the scene. It helped that
Right.
one of the ladies was an expert in video editing, so she could tweak things. And the first lady whose idea to even do this, her brother's in the film industry and gave her some tips, but her background is in music, right? So
Hmm.
we are so diverse. And that's kind of why I like working on projects with people you don't really, again, it's a story. We learned from each other. And I was absolutely shocked that we were selected. And unfortunately, the screening had to be in like a drive-in. It couldn't be in
Right.
the actual theater, of
Right.
course, right, for 2020. But that's a big deal to say I have that experience, and that's something I never expected. But I believe just practicing and talking on podcast helped me a little bit too, because even though we wrote it, we had to be the characters too. You couldn't get actors. We didn't have any money.
Right. And who's going to take a chance? Larry, look what we made. Go
These
read this while
crazy
I point the
ladies.
camera at you.
Right. And we ended up having it was a blast, and we just made it. We called adaptations is what we called it,
Hmm.
because we had to, I mean, everybody had to adapt in certain ways. And that's kind of how my podcast kind of veered towards that,
Hmm.
and how we all
Uh,
had adapting in life. It gives you resilience. And that's what I've learned. And I try to share with people. And that's why I don't have a guest on all my podcast, but
yeah, different format. Some host on mic, some.
right. And then I'm in the middle of finishing up my latest book, right? People like want to I just took my knowledge for granted too. we all do that. And Bridget, you understand books and how to make it and how to produce it because I worked in every aspect, but I thought it was boring, but it's not. It came out, you know what I'm saying? But we should help other people. Um, that's my goal is to help other people get their message out there, their story. And it
Hmm.
can be on through a book to help them get the book. I'm not publishing, but I'm helping them with the production aspect. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then the podcasting is something I fell into that I really enjoyed. And it was after I created an audiobook for my second book.
Hmm.
I'm like, I have this equipment, right? And so
I
that's
should use
why
it, right?
right, I
Um,
should use it.
I'm
And
wondering
it's
about if you take, so one of the things I'm always curious about is mastery level practice and like storytelling, clearly, because one can work on that forever and, you can go ever deeper and deeper. And I forget where I first encountered the idea of when you first begin learning something, it looks simple. Like in the beginner's mind, it's like, oh, you just do this,
right,
and of course, then we all chuckle, right? Like, oh, podcasting, how hard could that be? Storytelling, how hard could that be? Making a book, how could
right.
in the beginning, everything's simple. Oh, sure. And then somewhere along the way, assuming the thing you're learning is complex enough, then you begin to realize, like, oh, it's rabbit holes everywhere. There's complexity everywhere. There's an infinite number
Yes.
of choices. So you go from this simplicity to like a ridiculous complexity. And then at the top of, if you're imagining a pyramid, at the bottom, you have all this simplicity, and then you move up to this complexity layer. And then somewhere, I don't know if it was Saint-Exupéry, Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, somebody wrote that the ultimate sophistication is simplicity. And you get to this idea at the top of like, it's an informed simplicity. Like you're aware of all the complexity and you've chosen certain details. So that it's hard to unpack all that audibly, but like that idea flashed into my head when you were talking about how you've used storytelling in these different mediums, podcasting, writing a book, doing a movie project. And I'm wondering, is there something that you want to do with storytelling that is like maybe different or in a like a that looks really simple, but it's actually informed simplicity?
Yeah, that's kind of my business is focuses just on books, but it is called Gemini Media. So I think because of the experience I'm learning and I'm meeting new great people to offer that to other people. Does that make sense? And I
Hmm.
agree with you. The simplicity, some of the stuff people are saying I should do with my podcast, I don't care. I know it sounds terrible.
That would be a thing that I could do to make it more complicated.
Right. I'm like, no, right? Otherwise, I won't do it. Right.
Yeah.
And then that's kind of why I like with a book, you can take, I guess because of marketing is just really, it's about getting people to trust you in stories. I think marketing is about stories.
Right.
And
Totally.
podcasting is a great method to use to get for business or your own brand. Is that the right word?
Yeah.
Same with the book. So you can use the content of a podcast into a book. Or I know some people who are taking some of their podcast conversations and created a book out of it, different
Yeah.
chapters, which is cool. I've, I'm not sure. Everyone's telling me I should have a transcript for all my podcasts, and I just haven't done that yet because why are they? Is that really true? Because as someone who
Depends
listens
on
to podcasts, I'm not going to read it. Do you know what I'm saying?
right. And the like we were talking about before, the the voice is different, not just first person, third person, but the voice is different. So when you,
Yes.
because I have too many different podcast shows, but one of my shows, I do long form conversations recorded in person with people. They can be like 2 hours long, and we do full transcripts through a professional service that's not free through an AI software. And we
Right.
spend significant cost on that. But then we do something with like, yes, the transcripts are searchable, but we also like extract things from that and write articles and use it as a source. So I agree with you that yeah, you don't want to just do transcripts just for fun. I mean, it is handy for some people who may be auditory impaired who want to
Right.
consume, but it's like, yeah, but do I need that feature? Like, do I need all these bells and whistles, or what do I actually need to convey
And
the
your
message of the
audience.
story? Yeah,
What does your audience want? And that's kind of why I think it's fine if I do some clips too for my podcast.
yeah, for sharing,
Just
right?
little clips. So if people like the content, then they'll listen to the whole thing. But I think it's just a combination of what does your I should say reader, your readers or your listeners, what are they wanting? wanting out of this. And that's
Yeah.
kind of why I do have some video clips, but I record mine on Zoom. But then I also have it, you know, distributed to multiple places, but I put it on a platform that does this distribution for me so that I don't have to, there's only,
Spend a whole
right,
day pushing buttons and pulling levers.
right. And I mean, I pay someone to help me to do these clips, but I don't, my business focuses right now on books, right?
Mm,
So I started doing the podcasting with the guests, and most of my guests are authors. So kind of like
mm,
I try to make it weave together to make it make sense.
yeah.
And we do focus on, resilience kind of is what it is. And adapting. And that's kind of why everybody's had to deal with something. And that's why I like to share stories. Again, we're going back to why I think we can learn from it. And like, yeah, and you can empathize, is that the right word?
Yeah.
With them. And you're like, yeah, I'm not so bad. When they share these things, right?
You,
Right.
sir, are messed up, right? No, I know what you mean.
Right.
I
And I
know what
think
you mean.
that it helps people become more confident to try new things. And I am one of those people that have always been a risk. I think that's just my personality, being a risk taker because
Mm,
of the environment I grew up in as a military brat. My father, you know, we
mm.
were on our own a lot. I'm surprised my brother and I survived, but didn't burn things down.
Yeah.
But then I think that's not bad either,
Yeah.
right?
You
And there's
mentioned
some bad
helping
things.
people in your when you're talking to authors, you mentioned helping people. And I love that idea that what I had always thought about it in the context of podcasting. Like I'm well aware that when I reach out to a guest or when I do, this bit of work or that bit of work to make it easier for them, that you're offering that person a gift. But I had never, and like a story, if I give, well, physically, if I give the book, that's a gift. But I mean, the act of creating the story is a gift to the reader in like a superficial sense, but also like in a deep sense that their experience of reading it might actually transform them, even though it's a piece of
Yes.
fiction. And I'm wondering, have you found any, since you're clearly aware of that, have you found any challenges in trying to give gifts to the person on the interview with you in your podcast?
Not really. They a lot of times they want to be on my podcast to promote their book. To be honest,
Yeah, the press
that's
junket, right?
that's kind of what it is. And I don't have everybody on that reaches out to me, but the gift is that we're connecting, right? That's kind of what it is. And I do give them some clips. That's kind
Hmm.
of part of the thing, and they feel more confident that we have more. We try to have. I try to find commonality with every guest. Hopefully that makes sense. And that's the gift. Make sure they feel good about themselves. And I do kind of jump into why they decided to write a book. And like you said, people think, oh, when you find out the backstory of something, majority
Hmm.
of my, when I do have guests, majority of them they're not fiction writers. Probably the majority are nonfiction writers, but we all have, you want to make it fun. Hopefully I'm answering your question properly.
Yeah, no, I
But
mean,
I think people, my perspective is I've always looked at the positive side of something. That's just the way I am too. There's a lot of bad, negative things out there. And I think if we focus on the negative too much, then you don't want to move forward, right? You get stuck.
absolutely. You have a, what's that called? The word I think is salience. Like your brain, there are certain things that are really salient. Like your brain really notices snakes. Like it's just,
Yes.
that's like buried in the back of your head from being apes in tree. Like, whoops. And I always say I'm afraid of three kinds of snakes: little snakes, big snakes, and any stick that looks like a snake. Like those are the three
Yeah.
things.
And you stick, right?
Yeah. So, but if one goes around looking for negative things, guess what you see? Like you're going to start seeing negative things. You get that
Right.
confirmation bias. So,
We
I,
have, what I was going to say, you have to acknowledge the bad. You have to acknowledge it. But at the same
yeah,
time, I try to look at the good in a situation. What good can come out of that? That's
yeah,
kind of how my focus has been. I don't know why I'm that way. And maybe because
mm,
I'm probably the biggest influence in my life was my stepfather. That
mm.
kind of, you don't realize that though as you're growing
Yeah.
up.
At the time,
At the time, you're like, wow, he is why we are the way we are. And it's just amazing. Again, what we can learn from other people and being open and looking at, yes, there's pros and cons, but then acknowledge that and how can you move forward. And to me, looking at that little negative or it's okay, you got to know it's there, but then how can I move forward? And that's a positive step. Expecting the good, by the way, is the name of my second book, Expecting the Good, because
Brilliant.
you've got to
Yeah.
acknowledge it, but this is how we move forward.
Hmm.
And being that's I used to be told sometimes you're just too positive. I'm like, so um, I've been
Here,
I've
have
been
some
told,
negativity. Shut up.
right, just shut up. I'll be positive as much as I want to be, but I mean that's just my personality.
Yeah.
And trust me, there are I'm not positive 100% of the time, but I try to make people feel better about themselves, and that's kind of why I help if they want to do a book or if they want to be on the podcast. And then I'm gonna just so you know, I'm playing around with another film, and
Episode 2.
right,
I think,
it, it was hard work, but I enjoyed it. You know
oh,
what I'm
that's the
saying?
best kind. Like exhausted for good, not exhausted for like terrible stuff. And I really love uh, like the underlying message that you have here about positive and working toward the positive. And um, you want to do a really hard question? So, like, one of the things I like about this show is most people are used to writing or podcasting, so that I can like throw really hard questions at them. If you had to boil down everything that you've learned in your entire life, all of your worldly wisdom, into a tweet in the old days when it was 140 characters, what would that tweet be?
If I could
Not
boil
easy.
down my knowledge,
Mm.
um, that's a tough question.
Hmm.
Uh, it kind of goes maybe what I was saying before. Look for the good in a situation to help you move forward. That's kind of what it is. And I've been through a lot of bad stuff. I don't think I can cuss on here, but
you you
I'm a
totally
hockey
can.
mom, by the way.
Yeah,
Um, so you know that we're cussers. No, but I always try to look and try to encourage people by looking in the positive situation. We all have to deal with that stuff. Hopefully that
great.
helps.
Well, I say this all the time. I run out of adjectives. That was awesome. It was fun. Pleasure to meet you. Thank you for taking the time. And yeah, thanks so much. I don't know what else to say.
It was awesome. Thank you so much, Craig.